So
Yeah.
depending on the way a headline is written, it can still be factually true,
Correct.
but it leaves out all the context and the detail.
Correct. And
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 that's what we're talking about today.
correct.
Headlines
And
create your worldview.
exactly. So what you allow to get in that headline and what you leave out of the headline defines and so it all really depends on how you want to steer it. And news people, okay, and I'm talking about the people that run news organizations, they know that. And because they've done it, I mean that's what they do. I mean, right? I mean when you have a headline that's sensational, you will get much more attention than if you have a headline that is
Well, yeah.
pretty bland. A man kills two at a religious organization, to be very, very generic here.
Well, it's the old
right?
journalistic axiom: dog bites man, nobody cares. Man bites dog. That's a story. Good day, everybody, and welcome to another iteration of Inside Reality. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria with my co-host and the producer, Jimmy Tran. Today, we're going to talk about your worldview is probably wrong because it's an accumulation of a number of headlines that you put together and you aggregate some superficial sense of what is reality. Please like the show, hate the show, do something about the show, share the show, comment about the show. But, Jimmy, over the last couple of weeks, it's really struck me that, again, when I watch people of influence, whether it's on the political side, the social side, whatever side it is, their worldview tends to be based on what I could, deduce. It's an accumulation or aggregation of a number of headlines without anything that's more critically thought out. What do you think?
I think that you're now discovering that.
No, I've known that a long time, but it's become crystallized and institutionalized. Again, like we talked about in one of the previous shows, depending on what media outlet or where you're getting information, that particular outlet has institutionalized a worldview that's generally based on a lot of superficial accumulations of headlines and conclusions, if you will.
Yeah, and that, I think that's one of the biggest problem that we're dealing. I mean, well, because we do live in a very fast-paced world, right? And so everything is, bite-sized. I mean, and of course, because whether it's on the business side, I mean, that's one of the things, right? Everybody has the attention span of a goldfish, as they say, right? And so for marketers, they gotta make sure that they pack everything into that one. And of course, when you over summarize, you end up with losing a lot of the nuances. Which, in really, what's interesting is that in today's world, those nuances are what makes the big difference. And I think that you're right in terms of not being able to get to the nuance when you just grab a headline. And headlines, are really designed to grab attention and sensationalize or really even just highlight one attribute, whatever it is. But when you start digging into the details, all of a sudden you discover that, hey, it wasn't as bad or it wasn't as good as you might have thought because of what the headline,
Well, it's
communicates.
what I call intellectual laziness. I happen to have a lot of time, but even when I didn't have a lot of time, relatively speaking, I have a curious mind. And I tend to be process oriented and a little methodological. So even 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 15 years ago on a Thursday, I tried to, dissect what I'm reading or what I'm digesting and question it and understand and contextualize it. That's why I've spent thousands of hours studying the Roman Republic, Julius Gaius Caesar and his the folks that followed him, right? That's why I've studied epistemology, which is the science of studying how do we know what we know. Sure. Even a little bit of ontology, which is what is existence. So today
Yeah.
we're talking on Inside Reality about your worldview. Have you questioned your worldview? Because I suggest that for most Americans, I can't speak for other countries, they're accumulations of lots of headlines. Here's a quick example. Trump is militarizing Chicago and democracy is dead.
Yeah.
Well, again, when you read that headline, and most, the people that hate Trump are gonna attach themselves to that, and it
Yeah.
is technically true.
And,
If he does send the
but that's the
military
intention,
in,
though.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying that is part of the intention of that, right? I mean,
Of
because
course.
when
Yeah.
you have an echo chamber type of phenomenon that occurs, you can just use these summarized expressions, statements, and whatever, and
Right.
you will get people to. I mean, in a way, it's actually reinforcing those predilections that people have already, whether it's about Trump or whether about whatever it is. I mean, you
Right.
pick a topic. I mean, that's really. I mean, in many respects, that is the essence of branding, right? I mean, you're a branding kind of guy. I mean, you know branding, you understand branding, and I think that that's really one of the marketing elements that we can bring into this part of the conversation to, because that's how people either accept or reject a particular product, in the business side anyway, is how you position and brand those products. And so I think that that's really what we're seeing here is that in one level, the people that are doing it, I believe that they're really doing it intentionally with
course.
that in mind,
course.
obviously.
Yeah.
And so that raises the question is, okay, well, does that mean that everything that they present or what part of what they present can be is true or not true? That's to me the big question, right? I mean, I know
Well,
you said
the issue for me, again, today we're talking about your worldview is probably distorted, biased, or false.
sure.
Because whoever you are you getting all your news from, Facebook or YouTube or whatever the hell, CNBC or Fox, whatever? If you are, you're getting accumulations of lots of little headlines that are superficially put together to bias you to continue that worldview so you can continue to subscribe to whatever the hell they're selling, literally, whatever they're selling, whether it's viewership or likes or clicks or buying products they're selling, whatever it is. And so the issue to me isn't the source. It's not CNN. It's
They all
not
do it.
Fox.
Yeah.
The issue to me is the consumer. It's we the people. Until we start questioning ourselves and the information we're digesting and operating our lives based on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until we do that, we're going to continue to be there'll be fissures throughout society. There'll be tribalistic proclivity, and there'll just be a lot of people that will continue to institutionalize and retain power while manipulating the rest of us,
Yeah.
frankly.
Well, here's the big kicker, though, is that how is this any different? I mean, I know today we have all these other technology, so we have the Facebooks and all that, but how is this really any more different than what has really happened in the past? Because certainly, outside of the United States, most of society, with the exception of a few, are still fairly primitive in terms of their sophistication, right? I mean, because they don't have the technology advancements, and they don't have a lot of these things, and so people like for instance, India has 1.4 billion people, I think almost 1.5 billion people, and a large percentage of those people, I mean, that's 4 times the U.S. population, more than 4 times, right? And yet, when you look at them, the majority of the people in India or like even China, as advanced as that they are still very what do you call it? Back last century in terms of their what they have access to. I mean, the most that they have access to probably is the cell phone, and that's it. Everything else is still in terms of their thinking and in terms of their outlook in the world and so forth.
Right.
Is still kind of what was there, even 100 years ago or more. I mean, depending on how old some of these civilizations are. Mm-hmm. So then the raises my, like I said, the question is that, I mean, does that mean that how is that any different than what we've seen before?
It's not really different. But you're bringing up a number of questions, not just one.
Sure.
Again, today, this is Jeffrey Candelaria, Jimmy Tran. This is Inside Reality. Every week we talk about sometimes obvious things, but we talk about topics and dissect the hell out of these topics. We don't agree with each other all the time. We're not here to promote any particular, political side or the other, even though I self-admit to be a reluctant Republican. I'm still very disappointed by our two-party system. Having said that, here's the answer from my point of view.
Sure.
When you talk about China, when you talk about Japan, when you talk about India, when you talk about Sweden, whatever, first of all, you're talking about monolithic populations. For the
Sure.
most part, China is predominantly Chinese. Whatever that means, there's a certain anthropological collective understanding of how our culture operates. One of the issues of the United States, and I've argued this before, and the reason we're doomed is economics, laziness, intellectual laziness, lots of other things, but we're so eclectic, we're so diverse that we have anthropological differences, cultural differences, sociological differences. Well, that's part of ethnic differences, economic differences, that how can we agree on almost anything? It's astounding that we even agree, when you have 30% agreement on something, whatever it is. Number two, you also have more than any other time in history to this point, 340 million Americans getting their news and information based on a technology of their choice. 50 years ago, if you wanted, whoever the hell you are, you wanted news, there were only a couple of newspapers in your city. There were only 3 networks. And most of those networks basically told the same story. You didn't have 125 different channels to get the same information about a headline.
Yeah.
Right? So people can gravitate toward a source that propagates headlines. Trump is evil, Trump is a Nazi, Trump is, killing democracy. And you can just, your worldview can just be based on that channel. And I think that's what's happened, is that. Now, you ask, is this any different than 1,000 years ago? No, people have been intellectually lazy throughout the human condition, but 1,000 years ago, you generally had one source propagating whatever story they're selling, and the population either accepting or rejecting it in kind of mass. Now we're just so factionalized. We get literally 100 different interpretations of Trump almost being assassinated in July of 2024. You'll get 100 different versions of that episode. Whereas 50 years ago, you got maybe two versions of it.
Yeah.
Or 3, That's a big difference.
It is. It's funny.
That's what we're talking about today.
It's funny as you're
questioning your worldview.
It's funny as you're describing all this. It's like, oh, this is exactly what I've been saying. In terms of the fact that when we look at the formations of countries, right, what we call countries today, they were all ethnostates, right? And so, like what you just described, ethnically, each place is very much, and the standard of deviation of their genetics is very, very small.
Right.
For a long time in history.
Yes.
This is the first time, and you like to point out that the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire conquered large swaths of places.
Right.
And even before that, when it was the Roman Republic, same thing. There was a large swath of people from all over, and predominantly Europe. You end up with
Mediterranean Europe.
Mediterranean, yeah. But the point is but the point is that again, still very small. I mean, I think the largest conquest was, I think, Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
That spanned between Asia and Europe.
Or the Democrats,
Yeah.
unfortunately. No, I'm
So,
not really being
but-
that sarcastic.
So in a way, as we talked about this as being an experiment here in the United States, in particular, right? Self-governance was one of those experiments, but the other part of the experiment that doesn't get talked about a lot is this diversity experiment that,
Yeah.
in your mind, is the demise and contributes
Part
to
of
the
the
demise.
demise.
Part of the demise. Yeah, and to some degree, you're correct, because there are different values. Okay, here's an example. Okay, in China and most of Asian culture, okay, the education is really at the top. So if you're an educator and you rise you rise through the ranks of an educator, you're considered the top rank. The merchant or the i.e. the business person is actually at the bottom of the social ladder. Okay, you follow?
No,
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah. So that's why when you have a culture where the culture prioritizes, that's why you see this dominance of Asians in the universities,
Yeah.
where they literally have policies that the quota thing is not allowed to allow them in, and that's why you have the whole issue with
What
Harvard
you're
and all
basically
that.
saying is most of the human condition until the last maybe 100 years or so was ethnocentric oriented.
Correct. And so the
Their way of-
worldview,
based on anthropology,
correct.
pretty much. That's
Pretty
why
much.
the Chinese and Asians emphasize education, which you're saying, more than we do. Because think about it, and people say, "Oh no, we emphasize education." Well, you just made a great
Not the
point.
same degree.
We pay people that entertain us, like stupid movie stars and basketball players and football players, literally 1,000 times more than we pay a teacher in
Yeah.
our society, because we don't emphasize education in this society, even though
Correct.
we always talk about it.
Yeah.
We really don't.
No,
That's
exactly.
why we're a dumb, ignorant society, because we really don't place education at a premium in terms of status, in terms of station, in terms of economic reward. You
Yeah.
make that, and that's an excellent point.
Yeah. And that's why when
Only
we look
on
at
inside reality.
And if you now take that same kind of breakdown and you apply it across various ethnic communities, ethnic groups, you see what you see in terms of the outcome, right? And so I know that with affirmative action, for instance, there was attempt was to try to reset that and trying to, but all that did was, in some cases, when you got to the extreme, which is what some of the DI stuff was really an extreme to that, because you're trying to enforce an outcome rather than making sure that the playing field is level.
Well-
but here's the problem with just
Well,
making the
well, hold on a sec.
okay.
You're trying to, by way of policy, arbitrarily force an outcome. Blacks are going to be more educated or whatever.
Yeah.
But the problem is, with these dumb, fat, donut-eating politicians. This was mostly during the freaking Lyndon Johnson administration, by the way. What they didn't understand, what they still don't understand, and maybe they intentionally don't understand, is you can't manufacture and you can't legislate the family value. If the family doesn't value the educational outcome for their black kids or their Mexican kids or whatever the hell it is, the outcome's never going to be realized.
Correct.
Because until the outcome becomes one economically incentivized and becomes a social, I guess you say a social economic value, you're not going to have good outcomes.
Yeah.
Until you value the outcome, it's not going to be a good outcome.
Yeah.
It'll be a false outcome if it's just incentivized economically, but it won't be a valued outcome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we see that even with our, with children and so forth, right? When we give them, everything that they want, there's no, So
Yeah.
anyway, I won't go down that path.
Well,
because I don't wanna-
the Chinese say your people, no offense, your people, you value what you earn.
Yeah.
You value what you earn. And that's another part of the verticality of our population when we went to cities and became vertical instead of horizontal and working on ranches and farms, working with your neighbor, and you truly
Yeah.
had symbiotic relationships with your community because
Yeah.
one part of the community provided the water, one other provided the wood, one provided the blacksmithing, one provided the food, whatever. And you really had symbiotic relationships. Those have been removed and
Correct.
artificially, installed in our city world, if you will.
Yeah. Well, that also is one of the reasons why things like socialism and communism, have failed time and again. Because to me, one of the reasons, I mean, it actually can succeed, but in order to succeed, you have to have literally 100% agreement.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is why Mao, for instance, killed off 80 million, people early on, was because they didn't agree. They didn't want to follow the agenda. So they just starved them out. I mean, you can argue ethics and all that, but that is, it's kind of like if you have children, okay? I use that because to me, that's the most obvious and very direct model to, and I know that you don't have children, but you can understand because you were a child at one point, and so you live in a home, and if there's a child that doesn't want to participate in the, they don't have to do everything that the parents, put out there, but if they're not participating in the home, it could become a big problem, and that's why you end up with problem children and all that. I'm oversimplifying, don't get me wrong here, but I think that that's one of the thing that we have to really consider. And so when you don't have very clear common interests, right? So you have interests, and then you also have to have common value, and the United States is built where the common value is not as precise. It's a more general principles than there are specific values like what we might think, right? I mean, some of the principles are like, for instance, the idea of freedom of speech. But we do have people that come here that really don't believe in freedom of speech.
Well, we don't really have freedom of speech, so that's nonsensical.
Well,
we probably, relative to other countries, maybe
principally
we do, but you can, you know what, let's be completely honest here, and we're off on a tangent, but I'm going to say it because that's just my nature. There are certain, depending on how dark your skin is,
sure,
the darker your skin, you can speak with more impunity than the lighter your skin is in this country.
In the modern context,
Yeah.
though.
No, I get that.
That
I get that.
That wasn't always the case.
No, I
We've
agree with
shifted.
you. I
So-
know that. I grew up with Leave It to Beaver, where white people, no offense, they could speak with impunity
With
about
impunity,
anything.
exactly.
Now it's
it's the
reverse.
opposite.
The darker
Exactly.
your skin, you can say anything you want. Black people could say white people can't swim, or white people can't jump, or whatever the hell that was, and
Yeah.
they can speak with impunity. But if you're a white person and you say black people can't swim, or you don't see black
Whatever,
people,
yeah.
whatever, that person's going to probably jeopardize their career.
Yeah.
So let's be honest, we don't have free speech like we think we are. And don't get me, and we're kind of going off a little bit, but I think you'll agree here. Censorship is alive and well in this country.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
the more
and-
victimized you are, the more of you, here's what's really odd, and we'll come back to topic. This is Inside Reality. I'm Jeffrey. This is Jimmy. Like, hate, do whatever the hell you want, but attend to this show. It's really interesting. Victimization over the last 20, 30 years, the more victimized you are, the more power you actually have
yeah.
to do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
The more
Well,
victimized you are, the more power you have to do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. I mean, to the degree that the society has allowed that, though.
Yes,
Right. I mean,
of course.
and we have, and that's part of the challenges that we have. And even with censorship, even if we don't censor one another, we self-censor is another part, right? I mean, so that's
We're afraid
another
of
thing
losing
that
our
we
jobs. or we're afraid of being assaulted.
Yeah.
We're afraid of whatever the hell it is.
Pick your poison on that. I mean, it
Yeah.
happened. So now going
So,
back and you know,
going back to the
into-
topic though, headlines create your worldview. Relate some of this to a headline, and then let's talk about that. Like even what we just talked about. Like let's say, come up with a scenario where that could be a headline, a censorship related kind of thing, maybe.
So, like for instance, right now we're dealing with. I mean, I'll bring it up. It's a recent issue. There was that shooting that happened in, I think it was Minnesota. Was it Minnesota, right?
Transgender person, right? Killed
Yeah, but
bunch of Catholics. Or
but
couple
Catholic.
Catholics.
And so there's an example right there where they were trying to twist this whole thing. I mean, whether the transgender was the cause and all that, that's a separate issue. But I remember watching an interview of RFK Jr. because he had fired, someone in his in his department because I guess she refused to do certain things that he had asked her to do, and so forth. And so now they're going through this whole rehearing, and the person, one of the senators, was asking him question, and she actually brought up this whole thing, and she said that he has said that that it's the reason why this person was killing this was because of the transgender, the drugs and stuff like that, that was being used and stuff like that, and he's like, no, that wasn't what I said. And so anyway, there was an interesting kind of exchange that kind of took place. And the point I'm bringing up with this is that if you didn't know and saw that, right, it's easy to just take that snippet of what she said.
Yeah, well,
and
lots of outlets did. So you're
and put a
basically
headline
saying
on it.
RFK hates transgenders or something like that.
Exactly.
When-
Which was nothing
when in
even
fact,
close to
he
reality.
was talking about, and again, the guy was, or the girl, I forgive me, I don't
know who. I didn't
whatever the
read the
hell.
whole follow. Yeah.
Which the whole transgender thing is just to me there's a mental issue here, mental illness issue. The person had a mental illness, okay? Clearly. You don't go into a Catholic church and shoot two innocent kids by
You can go
design.
anywhere and shoot. Regardless
Fine.
of Catholic or
And
not.
then write a 28-page manifesto like the frickin' Zodiac Killer or something, and not be mentally ill somewhere along the line.
Sure.
And maybe transgenderism and mental illness, maybe there's some correlation there. I don't know. But don't be ashamed to admit or just say, if you're a journalist, a transgender, possibly mentally ill person slaughtered two innocent children at a Catholic church. And then, tell the story and the backstory and all of that as well. But that's actually a journalistically verifiable, factual headline, as opposed to man kills two persons in Chicago. If that's factually true, right?
Yeah.
Or let's say man or whatever person kills two persons in Chicago. That leaves out they were children. That leaves out it was a church. That leaves out the person was possibly mentally ill and had sexual identity issues, right? So depending on the way a headline is written, it could still be factually true.
Correct.
But it leaves out all the context and the detail.
Correct. And
that's what we're talking about today.
Correct.
Headlines create your worldview.
Exactly. So what you allow to get in that headline and what you leave out of the headline defines and so it all really depends on how you want to steer it. And news people, okay, and I'm talking about the people that run news organizations, they know that. And because they've done it, that's what they do. Right? When you have a headline that's sensational, you will get much more attention than if you have a headline that is pretty bland. A man kills two at a religious organization, to be very, very generic here.
Well, it's the old
right?
journalistic axiom, dog bites man, nobody cares, man bites dog, that's a story.
Yeah.
Man bites dog, that's a story.
Yeah.
Dog bites man,
Yeah, it's normal. Everybody has that.
Right.
Everybody has experienced that.
All
Exactly.
we're saying today in Inside Reality is be aware of how you're aggregating your worldview, whoever you is, because
Yeah.
I'm telling you it's biased. Because I watch Fox a lot, probably more than I should, but I don't watch Fox exclusively, and there are certain personalities on Fox I can't stand. I can't stand Hannity. I can't stand Laura Ingraham. There's a few others I can't stand because they're hyper conservative and hyper indoctrinated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least some of the other ones, they'll occasionally have different perspectives on their shows, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but all I'm saying is, be aware of how you're digesting, how you're accumulating, how you're assimilating the world, because people are biasing it, and they bias it because they get paid to bias it, right?
Yeah,
Either by
exactly.
advertisers or viewership or listenership or whatever the hell it is.
And to be direct and to be honest with ourselves as well. I mean, I think that we like to hear things that we can agree with. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
I don't think nobody's out there looking for something that contradicts their own perception of the world, right?
Yeah.
So the worldview that is framed. I mean, again, at the end of the day, you just have to be honest with ourselves, and then secondly, we have to also understand that in our modern day with the technology, we can become very, very easily put into this thing called the echo chamber.
Yeah.
Okay, and so basically everything that is presented fits into that worldview that we're talking about here.
Of course.
I mean, there's this thing in the technical world, in the marketing world called retargeting. Okay, and the way it works is really interesting. Okay, and this actually is one of the things that literally to do is actually form and create this worldview. So you go and you show up on somebody's website, okay, and then you show up at other places like the news site, or you show up in other places, and all of a sudden you're still seeing ads that are specifically directed to you,
Yeah.
that are for that website. Okay,
course.
that type of technology called retargeting, where they target you and then they retarget that message so that they can create a worldview, if you will, around the fact that, hey, you're dominant in your whatever category you are in from a business standpoint. So that, again, it's a manipulation to get you as a buyer to choose their product or service.
Well, all this
Okay?
comes down to what psychologists have been talking about for thousands of years. Well, I don't know if psychology as a discipline has been around technically for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Let's just say for the last 150 years. It's the
Yeah.
reduction of uncertainty principle.
Sure.
People want to reduce uncertainty. Why? Because they're denial of death, number one, denial of death. And number two, it's a pretty arbitrary, scary place, this place called Earth. You could get struck by lightning. You could have, spleen cancer. You can, somebody can shoot you from behind. Who knows? Whatever. No, you're laughing, but it's
Well, the spleen cancer
it's a
was
very
unique.
arbitrary place. We could be struck by a meteorite in the next 10 years. That's going to ultimately happen anyway. Our sun is going to burn out after it exhausts all of its iron elements. Okay. It's going to
Yeah.
become I believe, a white dwarf or a red giant. I forgot, depending on
one
how
of
big
those.
its mass is. The point is, people want to reduce uncertainty because it's a very uncertain, very arbitrary, very confounding place called existence.
Or
And
life.
all we're saying is question everything. Question everything, including yourself. I think it's a healthy exercise. Question how you're receiving and assimilating information, and question your worldview. I do all the time. I used to be a Catholic. I used to be a hardcore Democrat when I was young. Then I became a hardcore Republican. Now I'm more of a nihilist. The world's absurd. Like Nietzsche said, it's an absurd experience, but I try to bring some structure to it.
So you've been what they call black pilled.
I don't know what that means, black pill. What's that?
Have you seen the movie The Matrix? Right? You have the blue pill and the red pill.
Not interested.
Okay.
Not
Without that, it's hard to explain. But anyway,
No interest in the Matrix.
well, we're living in it. It's actually quite an interesting. You should watch it. Actually, I would encourage. There's a few movies that I think you would find very fascinating because I mean, within the context of the topic that we talk about, but also I think it can give you some context to kind of, in a way, how I think about things.
I just finished watching a 32-part episode, I, Claudius,
Uh-huh.
1976 PBS, the demise of Claudius, who was the successor to Caligula, who was the successor to Tiberius, who was the successor to Augustus, who was the successor to my friend and my hero, Julius Gaius Caesar. Anyway, all right. So headlines create your worldview, and it's probably biased. Make sure you question your worldview and the channels by which you're receiving and assimilating information.
Exactly. And what's really important too along that line is when you question it, I mean, obviously, I mean, I think that for me, I'm really very distractible, right? And so one of the big challenge for me, I'll be honest, having to deal with all these questions sometimes is overwhelming. And I know that you're a more determinate person in your
I am.
and in terms of your attitudes, in terms of your personality and so forth. And
Yeah.
so for you, it's very easy to see it, but for me, I get sometimes stuck in that gray because it's just.
Do you have
that's just,
attention
you know.
deficit disorder, whatever the hell it's called? No, I'm asking.
Yeah, something
I'm
like
not
that.
laughing.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
I'm not. I
Do you
mean,
have-
not clinically, but if somebody that knew me would say, yeah. So,
Yeah, I tend to be focused. I don't know why. I think my mother dying had a lot to do with it when I was a kid.
yeah.
I was either going to be subject to, all the gang member crap that was going on and all the. I hated the community I grew up in. I did. I shouldn't say hate, but I didn't. I was reviled by it. So I became kind of focused as
Yeah.
a mechanism and as a strategy to get the hell out of that world, man.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be part of that. Hey, bro, look at my tattoo. I drive a lowrider. I mean, if you like that kind of shit, that's your thing. But
Yeah.
I'm reviled by it personally. So I think my
Yeah.
focus was my mechanical, strategical vehicle to get the hell out of that
Yeah.
lifestyle, because I would have been caught up in it. Be
Yeah.
honest with you,
Well,
I would probably have been a good gang member because I have that kind of
Intensity.
of
Yeah.
intensity, and I have that
Yeah.
kind of anger, and I have that kind of black and white way of thinking, and I
Yeah.
am a bit of a leader. I often think about I could have been a hell of a criminal. I'm not. FBI, CIA, all you guys, I'm not. But in another world,
Well, if you were to study some of the, villains, if you will, of history, okay?
yeah.
I mean, they are some of the most brilliant. I mean, and then some of that we see it portrayed in film as well, right? I mean, every time you watch a film, the antagonist always seems to have the better toy, the stronger whatever. I mean, everything seems to be they're smarter and all that. And then you have this hero that is just like this dorky whatever and overcomes still.
Yeah.
So.
And I think Clint Eastwood sort of stylistically idealized anti-hero from a generation.
Sure.
Because you remember he was not really a heroic guy.
No. Yeah.
Like if you ever watched High Plains Drifter, even though he
Yeah.
was kind of the hero in a way, he rapes a woman in that movie. In his character, that is. And so, he's got some issues, but he was ultimately doing good over what had happened as a lot of bad.
Yeah.
Resurrecting as a sheriff came back.
Well, what's interesting though is that the American story, and when I say American, I'm talking about very broadly, okay, very broad stroke here. The story of the the formation and everything. I mean, in many respects, that's kind of what the U.S. historically have always been, more of this anti-hero type of character. If you were to cast the U.S. as a character
Really?
in a
Think
film
so?
or something, yeah,
Escaping
because I think
religious persecution and
Well,
monarchy,
from the stand,
that's a
well,
bad thing?
well, no, not necessarily a bad thing. I guess more a reluctant kind of where I mean, this is why this whole notion of isolationism is always this fight, right? In terms of why you want to be an isolationist, right? I mean, that's the complaint, for instance, against Trump for closing the border, for instance, right? And so there's this kind of struggle a lot of times, and maybe anti-Euro isn't the right term, but the idea
I
that
don't, I
there's
don't
this
think
kind of
Trump is,
reluctancy.
let's have a show on that. Trump is more of a Monroe Doctrine guy
Sure,
than,
he
than
is.
an isolationist,
No,
I think.
yeah, but from your perspective. But what I'm
Okay.
saying is that they pit him to be a isolationist because the fact that he wants to close the border, for instance. I mean, that's just the one specific area is that he's being accused of being an isolationist.
We could do a whole
And
show of why he wanted to close the border.
yeah, of course.
A lot of it
Well,
wasn't just.
well, we're logical people
A
would
lot of it
understand
was,
that.
I think a lot of it's economic too. But
Most of
anyway,
it is economic.
we got about 4 minutes.
So actually,
So
I'm
again,
gonna-
what we've been talking about today is your channel, whatever channel you tend to view, or series of channels, generally provides certain headlines or bite-sized segments of information, and your worldview, I would conjecture, is probably an accumulation, a collection, an aggregation of a number of headlines over the years. And it also helps you reduce uncertainty because that channel's going to continue to propagate the same kind of perspective. Trump's a Nazi, Trump is horrible, he's killing democracy. Or on the other side, Trump can't do anything wrong, he's a hero, he's the greatest president of all time. I mean, that's a bit ridiculous, but you get my point. And all we're saying is question how you're receiving information, what you're receiving, and dive a little deeper beyond just the headline and try to contextualize, that headline, right? Contextualize the headline.
and even take it one step further if you're willing to do this. And of course, there's some danger here, and that is, of course, watch something from the other side of the fence, right? I mean, if you're a Fox guy, watch some CNN or MSNBC and see kind of that same story and see how that side of that story is being presented.
Or because people aren't going to do that, but at least maybe
Too
they'll
dangerous.
Well, no, because I'm cynical. Come on, the average person not going to do that. What they may do, and I think it's going to be a small percentage, is at least research the story
Sure.
on your own terms. If you're not going to watch Fox because you hate Trump, okay. But when you read a headline, Trump's a Hitler, read about what Hitler did, man.
Well, at least that, yeah.
Besides the 10, 12 million Jews and Slavs and gay people that he slaughtered through the Holocaust, another 35 million people died in World War II because of Hitler. So Hitler was responsible for 40 to 50 million people that died in a 7, 8, 10-year period. So when people say Trump is Hitler, it's a complete and absolute overt, palpable disservice to the 40 to 50 million people that lost their lives in World War II. That's what I mean about research a headline. Trump is Hitler. Read about Hitler's indefensible, incalculable destruction on the human condition. 40 to 50 freaking million people died because of Hitler.
And the sad part is that a lot of Jewish individuals, I mean, being Jewish and people that I know, bought into that, and so, and without even thinking.
The Trump Hitler thing?
The Trump Hitler thing. It's bizarre for me to even imagine that being their perspective. And part of it is because, again, they're driven by some of the same headlines and the worldview that we just talked about as well, because of their source of information, And
Hitler's a great example of, through Goebbels, his prime minister of propaganda,
Yeah.
They were delivering these messages about the superiority of the Deutschland and the Aryan race.
Yep.
And people started taking pride in that because it
Yeah.
was a monolithic country, mostly all Germans, Bavarians and Germans, right?
Yeah.
I guess there were Franks before that. And they had been economically, in a sense, humiliated, sociologically humiliated through the Treaty of Versailles and other things after World War One, that they bought into the manipulation of Goebbels, Hitler, Speer, Goering, and all those other guys, and looked the other way as to all the destruction that was going on, including to your people, the Jews, and others, to basically buy into a worldview.
Yeah.
So maybe
The
we
same-
conclude on that point.
Yeah.
Unless you, and that's a hyper example, but unless you question a worldview, another Nazi regime can manifest. I absolutely could. Absolutely could.
Well, right now, one of the biggest driving element is
One
the
minute.
CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've mentioned them before, and I mentioned it earlier. I mean, Mao literally killed 80 million, and I mean, and there's other. I mean, you know, Lenin and Stalin, who was involved in various massacres.
Pol Pot.
Yeah, Pol Pot and so forth. And you know, I mean, look what happened in North Korea. I mean, on and on. You can see that when people want power, they're going to do anything and everything, you know, to get there.
Yeah.
And when you contrast that and say that this person is behaving that way, it is absurd, because, you know, especially in this situation. I mean, some would argue, well, you cut off aid to whatever, you know, you are, you know, killing people and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
that's
Trump
really
was not
part of
personally responsible for 50 million people dying, okay?
yeah.
Or 80 million people dying, like the guy, what was it, not Shanghai Czech, what did you say?
No, Mao Zedong.
Mao Zedong, yeah.
Yeah,
All right, man.
actually 80
This
million.
is
But
Inside
anyway,
Reality. Been a
yeah.
good show. Question your worldview based on the source of your channel that you're receiving information from. Question everything, man. And
Yeah,
if you're
you
not
should.
going to watch opposing channels, at least research or contextualize the headline that you're assimilating. I'm Jeffrey
Yeah.
Candelaria. This is Inside Reality.
And
Please,
I'm Jimmy Tran. Come
Comment,
join us.
share,
Yep.
like,
See you
do
next-
whatever you want with the show.
See you next
Thank
time.
you.